Why don't we have all our speakers come up now, just so we'd be able to save some time. And instead of doing introductions, which would take time, we'll have each of our speakers who will introduce themselves briefly. I'm refining my comments as well. Many people may recall seeing footage of Robert Frost one time when he was going to give a great speech. And when he got up there, the wind came and blew away half of his speech. And he said it was all better for all of you. I'm doing much the same here. But I do want to note that I have the honor of representing two beautiful communities in Massachusetts. Many of you are around the nation. My two communities, Marshfield and Scituate, not only are they beautiful, but they have the distinction of having the highest percentage of Irish Americans in the country, which makes us, we affectionately call ourselves the Irish Riviera. But we also now are known as being the tip of the spear in the issue of storm adaptation in Massachusetts. And one of my comments from today, as Bill knows, I want to make sure that we get this right, because as we have been doing storm adaptation, we have two hopeful stories here, but one cautionary tale, because as my good friends here from Senator Markey's office, from Senator Warren's office, Congressman Keating, Congressman Lynch, the new FEMA flood maps, insurance rates, those can cause just as much damage, global damage and economic damage, as some of these storms that we are trying to prepare ourselves for. My brief comments. I've been a state representative for 5 years here in Massachusetts. It's the greatest honor of my professional life. In this time representing two coastal communities, we have an alphabet soup of agencies that we deal with. Folks here would know we have DCR that deals with seawalls, CZM with beach nourishment, DOT with our transportation issues, FEMA, obviously federally, and Army Corps. There has not been any cohesive organization to pull all these thoughts together for adaptation. And that's why I credit you, Bill Golden, for pulling this kind of organization together, because this is a phenomenal, phenomenal tool. As far as a regional approach, as we learned today, this is a joke, but I like to say the last time that our towns of Marshfield, Duxbury, and Scituate worked together collectively was the Revolutionary War. That has changed, though, with the tremendous work of some of our leaders who are here today. Paul Halkiotis, who's a town planner from Marshfield, Andre Martacchini, who is a former selectman from Scituate, and one of our speakers who's going to speak in just one moment, who is Rick Murray from the town of Scituate. The final comment I want to say, we have heard a lot of discussion today about national leaders and what they've done in the past. I hope we haven't lost that kind of thing. People talked about President Eisenhower, and Bill mentions about the need to have something on the scope of the federal interstate highway system to have this new coastal adaptation plan. People mentioned John F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy's plans of going to the moon, not because it was easy, Rick, as you said, or as he would say, because it is hard. We need that same kind of federal commitment to do the great work that each of our speakers today were pointing out to make sure that we can do adaptation for coastal storms. I'm so thrilled to be a part of this organization with Nietzsche, and I look forward to each one of these speakers to speak in line. I think I do not know if we're just going to follow right along the way that the forum was done together, or you want to start with you, Bruce? Bruce, why don't we just start with you? We'll go right in line. Bruce Berman, Save the Harbor, Save the Bay.
Thank you, Jim, and particularly thanks to Bill Golden. As I look around the room, I think that there's a good number of us who owe our careers and also owe a debt of gratitude to Bill, who's been ahead of the curve for more decades than he'd like to admit or that I'd like to count. I guess I've been asked to keep it to 3 minutes, and I just want to make 3 brief points. And frankly, it starts with a criticism of all of us. As we sit around and we find ourselves in the position that we're in right now, we find, and except for Lewis, as we sit in the room, we find ourselves in a situation that, in some ways, we're responsible for. I feel sort of directly responsible for it in some ways, because I was one of the leading advocates, in the fight against nuclear power in the United States. I, of course, blame General Electric and a number of other companies for making it necessary for us to put what could have actually made a difference on hold for 30 years. And I think we need to have a frank discussion about nuclear power. But here's what I think we can't afford to do. We cannot afford to just focus on mitigation and to throw up our hands and to use shorthand to go, Tea Party, China, what can we do? We just can't afford to do that. We have a responsibility to begin to have some frank discussions about ways that we can reduce greenhouse gases that we know are responsible for the situation that we're in. Tipping point or no tipping point. I mean, to let the feds off the hook or to let the political system off the hook, it would be a crime. And I just don't think that people are going to let it happen. That conversation is extremely unpleasant right now. It's not satisfying. It doesn't look like you can turn to international tribunals. I'll be surprised if what happened in the Philippines this weekend, results in a sudden, global response to climate change that in a week or two makes everything go away. And I'm also be surprised if we see some innovative legislation that comes out of Congress in the next few months while we're all trying to sign on to the Obamacare site. But that said, we cannot let denial, we cannot let, political hoo-ha keep us from acknowledging the fact that there's still more work to do there. That said, it would be imprudent and frankly short-sighted and ridiculous not to have the conversation that Bill is starting to lead, and I want to thank him for that. That's one. The second caveat is to those of us who think that protecting the built environment, particularly, and I don't want to talk about Boston because I live here, but protecting Wall Street, for example, or Manhattan is going to, result in, a future that's bright and rosy as Long Island and the Connecticut shoreline is washed away. You're crazy. This is a problem whose scope and whose magnitude is ginormous. I was talking to Joe before and also to John Sullivan. The thing I like best about the scale of the problem that we're dealing here is, the Boston Harbor cleanup was just a few $1 billion, which seemed like a lot of money at the time. But in the context that we're looking at today, it's orders of magnitude smaller. And that said, it's going to require a federal response. Now, if there was only a storm that was big enough to put the whole country at risk at once, then we'd all have no trouble selling the estimated $28 trillion, and I'm not making it up. Of course, I didn't use trusted sources when I got the number. But the ginormous cost of addressing these problems. What's going to happen is if you pick 20 port cities and you make the infrastructure investments in them, and there's economists in the room that can make the argument better than I can. It's clearly a great strategy, but if we only lose one of them every 50 years, you have people that are going to be arguing against that kind of investment, and we can't afford to do that. I mean, all politics is local, but solving this problem is not just a local situation, and it can't be a hyper-local situation. If we're successful and we, fortify the harbor walk and turn it into a harbor wall and, come up with ways to reduce the size of our, exposure here in Boston, build a wall across the harbor. If we do all that and Revere to Nantasket is wiped out, it's not going to be a very pleasant place to live. It's not going to be a high quality of life, and it's not going to be the community that I want to be a part of. So, the solution is going to be top down and bottoms up, and we can't afford to leave anybody out of the mix. Just one last comment. I was lucky enough to be with Mayor Menino and Julie and some others at the aquarium last week when the city, took some credit, well-deserved credit, for being way ahead of the curve in many areas in the Green City Initiative. But as I stood there and I looked from the aquarium to my office, which is on Boston's Fish Pier, take a good look at it because it won't be there if Sandy hit 10 hours earlier or 10 hours later. As I looked towards it, I was struck by the fact that although there were some people in the room who are here now that, and I'm going to probably get in trouble when I get home for calling this out, but that Massport wasn't there, that Fidelity wasn't there, that the Fallon companies weren't there, that the GSA weren't there, that the Intercontinental Hotel wasn't there, that the Children's Museum wasn't there, that Atlantic Wharf wasn't there, that the owners of Rose Wharf weren't there, and that the owners of the Marriott Long Wharf were not there. And unless we can get a true involvement from the business community and engagement from federal officials, and the kind of investments that this is going to take are not going to happen. And we desperately want them to happen. And we need to have them happen. Thank you.
My name is Joe Favaloro. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority Advisory Board. I represent the cities and towns, the 60 of them that paid the bills of the MWRA. As I listened to all of the words today, it really basically led me to, the first thing we all need to do is kind of like throw away all our perceived ideas and notions. because they don't exist anymore. The 100-year storm doesn't occur every 100 years, it's every other year. Climate is, you got to really believe that the wet times are going to be wetter and the dry times are going to be even drier. And that's how you have to design and look at things from this day forward. At the MWRA, and in no small way, we almost need to thank Mr. Golden, because he actually allowed us the first adaptation project in the country that went concrete, and that's Deer Island. Because when we built Deer Island, we were able to use the best available information at the time, and we raised Deer Island by 2 feet. The seawalls are higher. All of the infrastructure around it can survive much of what we've talked about today. But that's just one case. Amongst the rest of the MWRA projects, working cooperatively with Boston Harbor Associates, we looked at the 30 physical plants of the MWRA and evaluated them not only with the 100-year storm, but with the 100-year storm plus 2.5 feet. And we got different results going through each and every one of them. Most of the MWRA projects aren't at a severe risk, but there are many of them that have a moderate risk. And from there, they had the MWRA, under Mr. Lasky's guidance and leadership, was able to put together plans for each and every one of them. For the most part, there's what I would call best management practices. The day-to-day stuff that you can do right now. I mean, it's silly stuff. I mean, to some extent, it's stop logs on garage doors, it's storm doors on windows. It's also, as each construction project comes forward, an evaluation committee that takes a look and determines exactly what you need to make them as safe as possible as you move forward. And that'll happen over the next 15 to 20 years. On the water side, people long before us really did Greater Boston the greatest of favors on Earth, is that the Quabbin and the Wachusett Reservoir, with their great insights, if you believe that the wet is going to be wetter and drier is going to be drier, we have a reservoir system that can pretty much absorb pretty much anything that nature throws at us. For instance, if it were not to rain for 1 day over the next 6 years, we would still have an adequate supply of water. So we can provide water for the greater Boston area under many different cycles. But the message truly out of today is that we all need to remain vigilant, we need to develop plans, and we need to move forward. And to agree with Bruce, we can't allow the federal government to take a walk. We need a partner, and that partner has to be the federal government, because you're right. Boston Harbor project and all those relateds were billions of dollars. I don't know how many more zeros this will bring to us, so thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rick Murray, and I'm here wearing several hats. I'm an elected selectman in the town of Scituate. For you people in Massachusetts, you're well aware that Scituate gets the stuffing knocked out of it every Northeaster. For you folks from out of state, Scituate gets the stuffing knocked out of it every Northeaster. You're probably seen our town because we actually get national news. We have everybody in their TV trucks show up all the time. It doesn't rain cats and dogs, it rains reporters and TV trucks. Also, I'm a professor of oceanography at Boston University, and my expertise is in climate change and natural cycles thereof, and a little bit of the modern as well. So I kind of bring a scientific hat to the political discussion as well, which is in fact why I got involved in politics to begin with. I have a few comments